The Washington Commanders finished the 2022 regular season with an 8-1 record, and their season was very streaky to say the least. They started out 1-4, then won 3 in a row to improve to 4-4, then won 3 of their next 4 to improve to 7-5, tied the Giants, then lost 3 of their final 4 games to finish with an 8-1 record. And for a team that is average, there is surprisingly a lot to like about the Washington Commanders. You might think, okay, they have a player here or a player there, but they have a good football team. Minus one position, and unfortunately for the Commanders, the quarterback position, well, that's the most important position in sports, and they continue to avoid addressing the problem, or when they do address the problem, it's seemingly half-assed efforts and more of a, well, we're trying attitude, and there's a reason why they haven't won a playoff game in nearly 20 years. And in today's video, we're going to discuss why the Commanders have a big problem. And without further ado, let's begin. Every team's goal entering the season is to win a Super Bowl, and I realize that's an obvious statement, but what isn't the same is how every team is constructed. In fact, teams can differ in the most drastic ways and be within a game or two of reaching that final goal. If you want an example of this, look no further than Joe Burrow and Brock Purdy exiting the 2022 NFL playoffs on the same stage. Now, obviously they are nowhere near the same tier of talent or level of player, but football is a team game, and Washington has had a backseat view of watching how to properly construct a team over the past few years in the Philadelphia Eagles, as they became contenders year in and year out. This, of course, dates back a couple of years, but it's no secret Carson Wentz has struggled at points throughout his career. And to plan around this, just in case the struggles continued, or he wasn't going to be able to revert back to the 2017 player he was, Philly had a contingency plan in Jalen Hurts. And Jalen developing the way he has into a player that finished second in MVP voting in just his third season in the league was something nobody saw coming. But the steps in the process is what a team like Washington, for example, can very easily emulate. And for as frustrated as I get with Washington, which by the way is because they choose not to be aggressive when they need to, they have a good supporting cast for any quarterback to walk in and play with, whether that's Carson Wentz, Taylor Heinicke, or Sam Howell. Because we are in an era where receivers put up video game-like numbers and make insane plays, like the LSU boys in Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase, or even a technician of a route runner in Davante Adams, or just a freak athlete like Tyreek Hill. A receiver like Terry McLaurin gets lost in the mix, and over the past few years has accumulated over 4,200 yards and over 20 touchdowns, despite not having great quarterback play. And whenever receiver discussions are being had amongst fans, this is usually brought up, that Terry McLaurin is either a top 10 talent or very close to being a top 10 talent, but simply can't show that in Washington because he's had to deal with poor quarterback play for really the entirety of his career. And this is on a team with players like Darren Payne, who is one of the best defensive tackles in all of the NFL, and a player who just had an 11.5 sack season. And not only is Darren Payne one of the best in the league at what he does, he has help along the defensive line in a player like Jonathan Allen, who has notched 16.5 sacks over the past 2 years, and a player that's made back-to-back Pro Bowls. And to go back to Terry McLaurin for a second, he's not the only receiver on this team, as they have veteran Curtis Samuel, who had over 650 yards as a number 2 this past year, and a first-round pick from 2022 in Jahan Dotson, who quietly had 7 receiving touchdowns as a rookie. Washington has done a lot of good things over the past few drafts, and I will push back on one thing they did, as it didn't make much sense to me at the time, and it still doesn't now. For as much as I like Dotson, the player, they traded back from pick 11 with the Saints, who had the 16th overall pick, so they could go up and get receiver Chris Olave. And while Washington did receive a compensatory third-round pick, compensatory meaning that is where the pick was from in the third-round pick the Saints gave him, which was number 98 overall, and a fourth-round pick for the trade back, I would have rather them taken the better player in Olave at pick 11 because it was the same position. Had they traded back and taken a player at a completely different position than receiver, I would be fine, as they got decent value for the trade back. And this is more of a micro nitpick on some of the things they've done over the past few years, and it's not like Dotson is a bad player, or that the difference between first round receivers is a Justin Jefferson to Jalen Reagor level difference. All of this to say, a trio of McLaurin, Samuel, and Dotson is a pretty good trio, all things considered. And to be completely honest, I think it is one of the best receiving trios in all of football. Obviously, it doesn't compare to the trio out in Cincinnati, but these three guys can more than hold their own. And I do credit Washington for addressing the offensive line this offseason as they brought in tackle Andrew Wiley from the Chiefs. If you go and look at the raw numbers from Wiley in 2022, you may think, okay, why are you excited about a tackle who gave up 54 pressures and 9 sacks throughout the 2022 season, which also includes the postseason too, by the way. And there's a few reasons for this. The first is 6 of the 9 sacks he allowed, nice, came within a 3-game span against Tampa, Las Vegas, and Buffalo. Meaning in the 17 other games he played in 2022, as the Chiefs played 20 games as a team with 17 regular season games plus 3 postseason games, he allowed 3 sacks over those 17 games. And you also have to factor in the Patrick Mahomes effect with his offensive line. And what I mean by the Patrick Mahomes effect is, think of the highlight reel, downright absurd, batshit crazy plays Patrick makes that we've come to love him for, or if you're a fan of an AFC team that he has beat multiple times, you may hate him for. Within some of those plays, he tries to make things happen, which, even for him, can backfire. And if you don't believe me or agree with me, which is fine by the way, as we're not going to agree on everything, then maybe 4-time All-Pro tackle Mitchell Schwartz's words will mean a little more. He was asked who the most underrated Chief was in January, and he said it was tackle Andrew Wiley because of everything that's asked of him, and that right tackle is an insanely difficult position because of all of the excellent pass rushers he plays week in and week out. And again, this is from a player who was one of the more underrated players at his position for quite some time and understands what right tackles especially go through every single week. With how much emphasis is placed on left tackle, whether it's players like Trent Williams, Rashawn Slater, Christian Darrisaw, or anyone else, and by the way, no disrespect is intended to any team's left tackle I did not mention, defensive coaches are not dummies, and they want to win games too. So strategically, they will place their best pass rusher on the right tackle because he is presumably not as good of a pass blocker as the team's left tackle. Again, that's not necessarily the case for every single team, but that's how defensive coaches think. So naturally, a right tackle is going to give up more pressures, and for Washington to get Andrew Wiley on a 3-year deal for an average of just $8 million per year is an absolute steal. And this isn't even getting into the acquisition of guard Nick Gates, who they signed from the division rival Giants. And I realize I went down a rabbit hole of offensive line play and how numbers can be misleading, especially from a pressures allowed standpoint, but the main takeaway from all of this is that I love what Washington is doing, minus one position. And of course, that's quarterback. I know the plan is to have Sam Howell be the guy in 2023, and for the Commanders' sake, I hope that becomes a reality, meaning I hope he becomes the guy. It truly is an exciting time to be a Commanders fan, with the sale of the team expected to happen soon. We probably all feel the same way about Dan Snyder, and it is truly turning a new chapter for a franchise that needs it. But to place all of the eggs in the basket of Sam Howell, to me at least, is insanely risky. And yes, he will have all of the weapons we discussed in Terry, Curtis, and Jahan, and of course have Brian Robinson as a running back too, but to say we are fully trusting a player that's thrown 19 career passes in one start is a very unique situation, which is putting it mildly. And if Sam Howell does not work out, they signed Jacoby Brissett this offseason, which kind of goes back to the, oh well, we're trying belief or mentality, because we've seen enough of Brissett over the past few years to know what he is as a player, which is a good backup quarterback that can come in and spot start if need be, or finish a game if the starting quarterback goes down. And there's no problem with that either, because a common belief in the NFL is you are only as good as your backup quarterback. And Jacoby playing this year at $8 million is a good deal for both him and the Commanders because of having Howell on a rookie deal. My biggest complaint isn't the right word, but biggest gripe with the Sam Howell decision is solely banking on him. Because unlike a lot of other teams, like the Cardinals for example, who very easily could go 0-6 or 1-5 in their division, Washington has way too good of a roster to finish anywhere close to 2-15 or 3-14 or whatever it would take to have a top 3 or 4 draft pick to be able to put them in a position where they could draft someone like Drake May next year, assuming Caleb Williams is already off the board. It would take a monster quarterback effort to lose them games in 2023 because of all of the good players they have, meaning it would take 13 or 14 games like Carson Wentz had against the Browns in 2022 in a game he played absolutely atrocious. He had a passer rating of just 31.4 through 3 interceptions, and on one of them in particular was a blatant stare down of Browns corner Denzel Ward, and they lost to them while Deshaun Watson completed just 9 passes on the day, and lost by double digits at that. And you can nitpick games either way for this team and say, oh well, how close are they, as they lost to San Francisco by 3 scores, and that's a team who you want to play well against because it's really sizing up where you are in the NFC are very close to the best the conference has to offer. But this team, meaning the Commanders, beat the Eagles in Philly, and technically it was by double digits, but the Commanders scored on the very last play of the game as Philly was trying to make an improbable lateral play become a reality. At the end of the day, a win is a win. But perhaps the best way to buy into the 2023 Commanders was my favorite game they played all year, and it occurred in Week 18 against the Dallas Cowboys. They truly saved the best for last in this game, as they manhandled Dallas all day. And this wasn't a game where Dallas didn't play their best players and rested everyone for the wildcard round of the playoffs. In this game, the Cowboys rushed for just 64 yards on 27 carries for an average of 2.37 yards per carry, and Dak Prescott was uncomfortable all day. There are times where Dak rips passes and looks like a player you can build a franchise around and close to a top 5 quarterback, but there's also times where Dak plays awful and is out of it from the start, and this was one of those games. He finished just 14 of 37 and threw for 128 yards and threw a pick 6 too. And it's games like this where you look at the Commanders' defense and think they can compete with anybody in the league, from a defensive perspective, that is. And yes, if they play teams like the Chiefs, for example, they could quote-unquote get theirs, as they have a Hall of Fame head coach, quarterback, and tight end, and they put up 44 points in San Francisco last year. They are also paid to be the best at what they do. This team is also getting a healthy Chase Young back for a full season and will be an absolute thorn in every team's side they play in 2023. That is, of course, assuming they don't throw the game away. The roster outside of the quarterback position is built to win now, and I'd have no problem with them trading way up in this year's draft to try and make that a reality, because they have talent everywhere, and this team is the near textbook definition of a roster that should win with a quarterback on the rookie scale. I hope Sam Howell proves me wrong and they do just that. But that's all I have for today. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, please like the video and subscribe to the channel, as it would mean the world and help the growth of the channel a ton. Until next time, as always, please be safe and have a great day. Love you guys.